welcome back to Mentoring Monday podcast. This is your host Francesco. This is the second part where with Jane, we talk a little bit about more diversity. We open the forum to the question from the community, and we investigate some more about the challenge that we face in our industry, who we are, our identity, and what other people think about consulting and other challenge that we face. So I hope you enjoy the second part of the Mentoring Monday podcast, our conversation with Jane. And I wish you to see or hear your opinion in other episodes. So come comment in our page, in our LinkedIn, in our community, and be part of this amazing thing called cybersecurity. Hope you enjoy.
Okay. Well, it's exactly the same. So it doesn't change. It's actually being on the ball with this. So if you do have the resources to look at your threat intelligence, then you need to be using that. But one thing that, and I sorry if I didn't hear this because I was fiddling about to try and get back online. But it's actually being prepared for it, so it's, yes, you need to take, proactive measures to make sure that you are spotting, these things, and that you've done your due diligence, by having regular pen tests and things like that, and that you've got systems and tools to support you. But you also need to make sure that you are ready to be able to deal with it when something like this happens. So it's not a question of if it's going to happen, it is a question of when it is happening, but it's more so when you discover it is happening, certainly for the larger organizations. And so that's why you need to be prepared. You and your team need to be prepared, for this. And I have to say, I'm just going to plug IBM because I went to an amazing an event. I spoke at an event with IBM. I think it was this year. And they had their buses, that go around certain locations and things like that. And they have simulated attacks and what that can look like from, say, journalists phoning in and quizzing you and what's your messaging and things like that. How do you deal with it? And when I was involved in that kind of scenario, which was we were only limited to it for a short amount of time, maybe it was half an hour or something like that, we were in a room with very, very experienced consultants and things like that, and all hell broke loose because of how it was dealt with, the confusion. So it's being prepared for really it to happen and the discovery of it, so
I think it's a learning exercise. So
it is.
I love the principle of DevOps that you break something and you do a retrospective, and you learn from the retrospective. So I sponsor it in all my teams, saying, go ahead, try something, try actually to see it, because discussing about it, we can create a lot of nice PowerPoint, and big organizations that I work with love PowerPoint presentation. But the best evidence that I've seen around is like when you go and try, as you said, with when you go and try and see actually the effect and what are the things that happen that are unthinkable on paper.
Yeah, and it's doing almost like that pre-mortem, isn't it? So often we do that post-mortem and we look back and then of course everyone will plow in, to comment and say what, we should have done and so on, and to cast blame, and they're not particularly helpful at all. But it's actually trying to think ahead and, what other scenarios, what could happen, and use our brains, because this is what I see that we're not doing in our field. We're not actually engaging our brains, and we're waiting for permission the whole time, and we are consuming rather than engaging our brains.
And the IBM was, as Laurie said, the X-Force Cyber Tactical Operations Center. Thank you. The black bus.
Well, yeah. Yeah, thanks, Laurie. I couldn't remember the exact term of it. Yeah, it's really a
very simple term. It's like it's marketing. It's like a 4 pages name.
Exactly, and it's important. It was a brilliant exercise, and the beauty of it is doing something like that is you're showing, so it's not a case of a brochure or using your words or whatever. They're actually involved in it, so it's very, very powerful, an exercise like that.
Yeah, no, I love those kind of exercises. Does anybody else have any other question with Jane, or otherwise I'll ask a couple of myself. Let's open the floor. Go ahead.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I could put it in the chat otherwise. Hi Jane, it's Laurie.
Hi Laurie.
Back to the talk on entrepreneurship you were talking about, and you said one of the things you thought would be difficult was kind of making change happen when you were so young. I was just wondering what your top tips are for implementing change.
In what type? Can you be more specific?
Well, I guess in my scenario, I'm not running my own company. I'm working for a large organization. So making change initiatives happen when you're surrounded by, I don't want to say, I don't want to be stereotypical here, but a very male dominated and older age group.
As in, yeah, and also sometimes, I'm not saying this is the environment you're in, but sometimes there can be a tendency with environments such as it's not, you know, we don't need to fix anything, it's not broken, or this is how we've always done it. You know, I've been in environments whereby it's just, this is how we've always done it, and that's how it is.
Being a disruptor is
yeah, and I think I mean, top tips and things like that, have data. You know, whenever you're trying to move forward on something, you know, you need to make sure that you are being mindful of when you're effectively pitching whatever the change is. So catch them at a good time. Timing is really important, and then make sure that you have got all of the information there, because effectively you're pitching for a change, you're pitching for something to happen, an action to happen. So make sure that you've got all the information that you need, especially data, so that you're having data-driven conversations and things like that, if you can, in front of you. And also don't get too hung up if they don't change, because typically what happens is a lot of companies, a lot of leaders won't change. And in order for change to happen, it usually requires that organization or that leader bringing in a consultant who'll say exactly the same thing as you've just said. You know, so, yeah. You know, it's just saying, you sit there kind of saying, well, I said exactly that, you know, and I presented it exactly the same way, but sometimes I just need to hear it from a third party. You know, sometimes it is a case of the more credibility, the more influence you have, the more attention that they're gonna, you know, they'll give you. You've got more influence, you know, so they will listen. But a lot of the time, they won't. You know, so it does come down to also the culture. Have they got an appetite, you know, to change? Will they listen? You know, and in most cases they won't. So it is a case of finding that environment where they will, and where you can make an impact and where you can move forward on something. And it's not necessarily that you're doing anything wrong. It can just be that that's how the culture is. You know, it's very change-averse, and we don't do things like that here. That's not going to happen.
Or it's not the right time. So I always
not the right time. Yeah.
Always try to make it personal. Try to spin it up in a way that it solves their problem and is trying to solve their problem. Because if you're pitching a transformation and you're not hitting the spot of I'm solving your problem, not a generic problem, but one very specific problem. So make it very, very specific to their problem. Fundamentally, you're just a salesperson.
Absolutely.
I always loved the salesperson mentality, and pitching to startups or to investors actually gave me that you need to be snappy. You need to have a message that resonates, that is short enough that people can repeat. It's kind of a marketing exercise of your idea. You need to have a brand, a name. It needs to look sharp and defined. So you can.
Absolutely. And also to pitch it so that it means something to them. So you need to know exactly what, you know, because you just said something which is really important. It's just like, see it through their lens, you know, and, you know, be prepared for that and pitch it purely for them. You know, why does it matter to them personally? A lot of the times we try and make change because we know that it's good for the cause, you know, or for the brand or the organization and things like that. But sometimes the key is, and I would always do both, because that's typically how I pitch, but make sure it's relevant to that individual, that specific individual. So it's like, what's in it for me? And then also know what their stakes are, you know, what's the risk for them? What does moving forward on it actually look like to them from an adverse perspective, and then also from, you know, a positive perspective.
From an advisor perspective, the hardest thing to do is actually not be on the front line. So the best idea that I sold, it wasn't sold by me, but was sold by the same people, and I make them shine. But you need to be on the back foot, and you need to recognize it as a consultant. You need to make your client shine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Rather than yourself. So sometimes it's a marketing against your marketing exercise. So like the shadow that lurks in, you need to be a shadow that lurks behind a person and push that person forward so that they are the driver of your idea. You're not pushing it. It's an ego also. And with men, it works really well. I'm telling you.
Yes, I would agree.
We are egocentric. So actually on that subject, Jane, how as a main industry, how can we support better women? Because I struggle a lot.
Well, you know, the first thing is read my book, you know, because there's so, you know, I've got to say that because there's so much information. So it's like understand it, you know, why, if you've obviously got an appetite, you know, to help and understand, but the first thing has to be to read my book, because that opens things up. Most of the time when men read my book, and they are interested, you know, in the topic and what they can do, they turn around and say, is this really happening? Whereas the women who read it usually say, that could have been, any one of those stories could have been my story. And it makes them feel very connected and not alone. You know, so the first step has to be to read that book, because as Microsoft, you know, said to me, it's the only book out there that actually tells you how to solve the problem. You know, so it is about not second guessing, about being aware that we've all got, we're all biased as men and women. We're all biased, and it's just how it is. So we need to understand the extent of our bias, and make sure that we are not making biased decisions and behaving in biased ways, you know, when it comes to the work that we're doing. So read the book. What else am I thinking? I mean, it's supporting women. I always say what's good for women is good for men. You know, so really it is about becoming a better leader, you know, a leader of yourself and leader of a team, and also building that culture, either as a department or better still as a whole organization. You know, so it's looking at how can we, yes, do the right thing for women, but the right thing for people as human beings, you know, and many of the things that are certainly contained within the book, you know, because with the book, I go through everything from, you know, how do we attract, you know, the language that we're using, you know, when we're out there marketing to the industry, what are the words that we're using? How are we going about hiring? What are our processes, you know, there, so that we can either go about it ideally from a blind audition perspective. So we don't know what gender, age, ethnicity, religion, and so on anybody is. All that matters is actually can they do the job, and going about that in a blind perspective, not having any information on those specifics is really good. You know, and then all the way through to, okay, right, fine, you've hired the right person. How do you develop that person? And watching out for, again, more biases that can happen during reviews, again, in meetings, by not encouraging more women to speak up in meetings, because sometimes they don't, because they may feel it's not a safe environment for them to speak up in. So there's certain things that you can do by making sure that women's voices are heard, and the spotlight does go on your female team members. So raising their visibility, and making sure that they are getting access to projects and moving throughout the organization or out of it even. And you can do that with mentoring, and you can do that with sponsoring. So those things are massively important. And then obviously calling out bad behavior, you know, so it's just that whole looking away. It's just like turning the other way, whatever that behavior is. because then this is something that I think we're really poor at doing. It's just having the boundaries, what is acceptable in our department, our team, our culture, or me as a human being, what is acceptable, and am I going to look the other way when something unacceptable happens? And I can give you a good example, and it's the other day I was talking to a woman, amazing leader in the US, and she spoke up. Her team was performing, she was winning awards, and she was in a leadership position. But when some of her female team members came to her and spoke out about things that were happening, she went to HR and her line managers, and she ended up losing her job because she spoke out about what was happening. So but it is the right thing to do, and that's who she is as a person. She said, I could not have done that. But even though a lot of women were giving her the advice, keep your head down, don't speak out, that advice could have been given to men. I've seen and heard stories where that advice has been given to men. But you've got to do the right thing. If you don't do the right thing, and obviously that is a judgment call, and I would like to say it shouldn't depend on whatever situation you are in, and anything that's going on at home or financially or anything. That should just be who you are as a person and the values that you hold. Yeah, I know that sometimes it can be. So it's and it's very easy to judge, and it's not the right thing to judge. But I would always encourage anyone to do the right thing and not to look away.
And hopefully by more people doing this and by being more public, people will be encouraged to actually speak up and support.
Yeah. And this whole gender thing is really hard, because it's really hard not to divide. So it is a case of leveling the playing field and bringing women up to speed. But in the same instance, we don't, and we can't afford to divide, as men and women, and also as women and women. So it's whatever you do is usually a brave thing to do, and it is difficult because some things, even for example, tapping on the shoulder, it's just like a man tapping a woman on the shoulder. It's just like, that's unwanted touching, whereas the guy might think nothing of it, so it's just really, I think, understanding the situation, and then also being very crystal clear about
what you like and what you don't.
Exactly. And what's acceptable in your environment. Yeah.
Even though those kind of situations, sometimes can become awkward because it can become cold. And I actually had a good story of this yesterday, where I had the opposite, where I was discussing with my communication officer, and she accidentally touched my knee, and she jumped and said, I'm sorry. And I couldn't understand why she was so apologetic. And I say, well, that could be missing. It's like, I'm super relaxed about these things, but I can understand where in other situations that couldn't be accepted. And coming from a man, it was so weird to receive the opposite.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
so fun. But it actually made me think that not everybody has the same perception of a stupid, a normal gesture.
Well, this is it. But also as well is, you don't know what someone's background is. You don't know what they've been subjected to. So even, so yes, you've experienced that from the other side. And particularly if you've got touchy-feely people, which, can be, a sign of, just
a problem.
Someone exactly, not being sexual or anything like that. It can just be like, I'm a friendly person, but it's understanding that some people have had, exactly. Yeah.
I think that's where HR and counseling and, supporting those kind of things helps a lot, without coming with a sledgehammer and saying that's bad, but it's always in a context.
Yes, and certainly as an employee, you do have to be careful of HR, because HR look after the company. So the HR are there to reduce the risk, and HR are there to look after legally the organization, as opposed to the employees. So there's a lot of work to be done, I think, with HR. And that's why there are certain things that I would advise, you know, if anything has happened, you know, male or female, whether it's bullying or whether it's, you know, harassment or anything like that, sexual harassment, is just to be mindful of that, to go and seek external advice, you know, from someone, you know, a legal professional, and then to make sure that you've got everything documented just in case you need it.
Backing. And I think, as Yvonne is saying, is also depending on the culture difference and on the...
Yeah, absolutely.
As Italian, we tend to be more, you know, loud, expressive, and more confident, while other culture might not be, or might take that as an offense, or especially working in Britain. Sometimes, you know, you get certain gesture or certain interaction misinterpreted by too confident or too friendly.
Yes.
In US, I mean, in British culture, where there is an etiquette, and for us, it's important to understand that etiquette, but also it's important to understand. Many of my clients are worldwide, so we have to understand the cultural difference to avoid impasse or to avoid offending a person without particularly offending them.
I agree.
And I have very, very silly but good example. When I was in the UN and we were doing, we were signing paper, you weren't allowed to sign paper with a red pen because that was an offense for a person, because in some African culture, red is being used to declare war. A red pen were used to sign war declaration. So it's deeply rooted, but it's something that you normally don't think about it. So it's like, it's having that context and that environment and that knowledge from that should be an HR initiative, because it doesn't come from an individual. It can't come from an individual.
Yeah, well, I completely agree. And also, thanks to globalization, you know, we have a global marketplace. So often we're interacting with one another globally. So
I don't know if it's a good and a bad thing, because it can complicate things, but it also open up the doors to the world.
I think it's a good thing. But then I like to understand. So I find it interesting learning about different cultures, you know, and people and things like that. So it's harder, and that's the thing with diversity. You know, it is harder, and it can be slower.
Yeah.
And you know, and sometimes, you know, again, we're on the cusp of the fourth industrial revolution. You know, so everything's moving faster. So it is about speed. You know, speed with everything. Speed is the new currency, and of course, diversity, for all its benefits, you know, better decisions, better innovations, you know, higher profits, etc., can also make you slower. You know, and there is that rub. It's just like, you know, so there, you know, it's tricky.
It's hard. It's hard. Exactly. I think it depends by the context, and the best way to say it is, I think about it is, be open-minded, be relaxed, and talk about things. And sometimes you don't find an interlocutor, another person that want to talk about certain things, and that depends on your empathy and emotional intelligence as well.
I agree.
On trying to understand, am I breaching a context, or is that person not ready to talk and discuss about this thing? And this goes also back to the diversity in culture, because how I react to how my facial expression is in a certain way could be completely different in a different culture, and could mean a completely different thing.
Absolutely. And also we have, and the beauty of our industry is we have lots of different people in our industry. So many of the people can be on the spectrum. So they may not be able to read, you know, they may not be able to read you as well, or they may not be able to communicate in the same manner.
So I had a very good example of this with diversity of view of things. So if your brain works in a different way. So I had a person that had Asperger's syndrome and wasn't able to communicate. So I'm big in emotional intelligence, and I'm very empathic. And I couldn't read that person, and that person exploded on me at a certain point, and I couldn't understand why it went from completely normal conversation to an explosion, because then after that I realized he wasn't able to express emotion.
Yes.
So I wasn't being aware that a certain subject was pushing him over the line. And when he pushed him over the line, it just exploded, and I couldn't get it at the beginning. it's really threw me completely off for weeks.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
People, I mean, I was discussing with Lisa that she comes from an autistic background, and we had this discussion about how she views certain things and how we can make certain things more simple for those people. I think it's hard. It's hard because, as you said, moving at speed, sometimes you almost can't be that understanding or spend time to actually understand the context. So sometimes those people get left behind or run over by the speed of the change.
Yeah.
So it's tough. Life is tough. So I think we need to do the best in the time that we have and admit mistake. That's my view.
Yes, and be humble to learn.
Yeah.
So it's, I think, accept that, it's just like, how can I do better? If you come at it from that perspective, then you can always do better.
Yeah. So we run a little bit over, but thank you everybody for participating. I'm going to ask Jane to leave us with a very positive message on diversity and the future of cyber. So Jane, go.
Oh gosh!
As a closing statement, give us a very positive. I'll give mine.
Oh gosh, you go first.
Okay.
I didn't expect that.
That's the beauty of change. We change anyway. Yeah. No, I'll go with mine. So as the industry change, I think new things are getting into this industry, like social engineering, new trends coming into this place. So I think it's becoming more and more interesting, and more people can come into our industry, and we're getting better. I think fundamentally security is getting better. It's getting different. So we're getting new challenge, but interesting challenge, but we're getting better. There is more awareness, there is more opportunity, there is more money in this industry. And we are coaching, we fundamentally getting better. I have the feeling that it's getting worse and better at the same time because we get invisibility. But we're gonna keep hammering at it with this energy, with this positive attitude. We need to make security cool. I keep on hammering with all my mentee, with all the conversation, with all the keynote that I do. We need to make security cool to attract other people in the industry that are coming from a different background.
Security is, I love it. I love that. Security is cool. It's like security is cool. And that was like one of the reasons why I started my pen testing company, because it's cool. It is cool. It is emerging. It's diverse. It's one of the top priorities in terms of, the board, for businesses and things like that. But there's a big mission. The mission that I always talk about is, really what we're doing is we are securing the world's operations. And really what we're doing is securing the world's freedom. This is about freedom. So if you want, if anyone enjoys learning, the people are amazing. The community that we have in information security or cybersecurity is amazing. Now, I am in this industry because of the people. I absolutely love the people. I can despair of the people at the same instance, but I stay in it because of the people. So it's just an amazing industry to be in if you care about those things.
Thank you for staying with us. This was your host, talking with Jane and the community. We had the pleasure to talk about a number of things, including diversity, including the challenge that we face in this industry. And Jace was so kind to come on the podcast despite the technical difficulties that I hope are trimmed out in total. Again, thank you everybody for listening to this second part. It's been a pleasure. This was your host, Francesco. I wish you a good day, evening, night, regardless of where you are. This was Mentoring Monday. Keep on listening to us. Thank you.